So welcome back. The idea in this short presentation is to tell you a little bit more of what we at SWHAP have been trying to do to help a bit in this effort to do preservation. So let me go back to the challenges that we observed when we started looking at what people do when they try to preserve software over time. So remember, this comes from the previous introduction. So basically two ways: either you put something on the web page and people download it, or you show the code on the web page, or you rely on software forges, which are more modern and have a better user interface, better feeling. Now, the problem of forges, we have seen, I mean, there are some positive sides, much better user experience. You can navigate in the code directly. You have a version control that will be in. You can see how software will evolve, making a difference between a version and version after, easily, directly on the forge itself. But there are some negative points. One is the forges go away. Okay, they are not attached. We have a really simple. The other is that we noticed that a lot of people with goodwill started using forges to archive, quote, software, and this led to some kind of misuse. Let me try to show you what I mean. This is a simple example. So again, nothing against the person that did this. And it's really out of goodwill. It's important that this kind of things happens. But if you look at this particular example, you will see this is somebody that uploaded here the source code of a particular game, a kind of a fusion between WarCraft and StarCraft that was developed at the beginning of 2000. And that was distributed on the source code. Let's see. Then what this person did is let me try to save it and to archive it and preserve it. And the result was you read everything that is on the CD, you put it in a directory, you upload it to a forge, and this is what you see on GitHub today, which is a popular forge. So I will give you 10 seconds to try to spot the issues that come with this particular use of a modern forge to archive landmark legacy software. There are more than one. Now let's see if you found all of them. But I've highlighted some. Okay? Who is the author of this software? Is the person that actually uploaded the source code. I'm not here with you, right? And the author is somebody else. When was this software developed? 2015, says the forge. Not true either. Like it was developed in the beginning of 2000. Then what are the comments here? You expect side by side with the source code, some comments say modify this line to the back. No, here the comment is copied from the CD, not very useful either. And then you see this kind of metadata in a strange way than this one. So this is not what you expect when we are trying to do software preservation. We want to do better. So that was one of the reasons why we started back in 2019 working with the people in Pisa in the occasion of this 50 years of the creation of the Department of Ethics and Civil, so the first one in Italy, to try to understand if we could do better. Leveraging at the same time on one side the modern forges, and on the other side the software archive. And because otherwise you could just say, hey, why do I need to do anything special? I have put everything on GitHub, and these 9 people from software heritage actually archive everything that is on GitHub. Fantastic. So I put it on the forge and it is archived. And the point that I want to show you here is that no, it is not enough. We can do better. So if we want to go back to the drawing board, what we want, okay, of course, in the collect phase, we want to find the source code, the material, gather them in a place where you keep what you got when, from whom, and how, etc. Then you need to curate this material. Okay? You take this CD with tons of code on it, source code, so whatever, organize it, understand who is the author of each part of the software, when each every version was developed, by whom, how, putting together all this information, which is practically historically important information, okay? That is being lost or otherwise. There is also the issue of getting the authorization to share all this. Remember the discussion about copyright we had a few minutes ago. And so at the end, you want to have proper metadata that describe all this in a format which is standard that can be reused worldwide. Once you do all this, you want to archive all this material in a place that actually guarantees that it will be possible to keep it in the long term. And then we also want to present this material in a way which is easy for people to actually adopt. And of course, since we are trying to do our best to maintain the historical record, we want to have traceability of every single one of these steps. So when we found this particular CD, from whom? When we read the material from the CD, with what tool? When we did the curation and changed this particular mistake, he did it, etc., etc. All this need to be traced in some way. So I will not go into the details because you will see it by some of the people who actually did this. The result of this reflection was coming up with this storage acquisition protocol, or you can say software acquisition protocol, curation protocol. The result, I will show you the result, not how you do it, but what is the result and why this is different from what you have seen just on the forge. So remember, in the Paris call, we had this curation. The documentation is available on the website of UNESCO. You have this document published in 2019. And inside you will find a detailed process on how to actually curate and archive source code. So we do not go into the details of how you recover it from a hard copy or the things we have seen here. We suppose you have some source code available, how you actually create, add metadata and have it properly, and how a process can be set up to actually have traceability all over the place using modern conversion control tool. So let's see one overview of the process that you can find in the document. So there is an initial part that is a collection phase where you need people that are experienced in collecting material. That can be physical material that need to be archived somewhere. Then once you get out of this physical material, the source code in a digital format, material in a digital format, you need to curate it, separate it. In the same archive, you can find the source code of 3 different programs or 4 versions of the same program, so different things inside. Or you can find documentation alongside the software. So you need to curate the separate things properly, add the proper metadata, and then somebody need to archive it in archive. So the SWAP process actually takes into account these 3 steps. Collect, curate, and archive. Doesn't talk about preservation. This is something which comes in the story, so we will see tomorrow. So let me give you one example of the result. This comes exactly from the effort that were spearheaded by the people in Pisa on that occasion to recover some Denmark legacy source code. So here is a view inside the software heritage archive of one particular project. It is a fragment of the source code of the Taunus project. It was a project to develop a music synthesizer in the 70s in Pisa, where people actually started doing electronic music. Look at the 2 things that are highlighted in green. The view that you see is actually the view of the software heritage archive. You see, it is not just a zip file, it is much more. You are visiting the source code like you would do in a forge. And here you see in the 2 green lines that there are actually 2 branches in this particular project. One branch which is called head, the one which is shown by default when you visit the archive, and another branch which is called source code. There are 2 different lines, 2 different branches where the software is stored with its history. If you look at the head branch, the one that shows the description of the project, what you find is a readme here that says, hey, here this is the result of an effort to recover the source code of Taunus. If you look at the version control history on this particular branch, you will see all the operations that the curator made on this particular part. Carlo, who is in the room, or Guido, they actually did modifications on this particular information on the metadata, etc. And you see this has been done in 2021, the last modification, why the software dates back from the 70s. But then if you move now to the other branch, the branch that says source code, now things are pretty different. What you see is actually the real source code that has been recovered there, not polluted by other files or other metadata that are in the separate branch. And here, the information that is associated to it is the information about the real author of the software with the real date when the software was actually made available. You see, now it is 1972, and the author is Mr. Pietro Grossi, the deal. And then you can actually play with the interface, and you can look at the history there. Now, the history that you see in this branch is the history of development of that particular legacy software, not the history of development of the curation that is in a separate branch. And then if you look at particular one of these commits here, the modification, you can see this is a particular revision that was authored by Pietro Grossi in 1972, and then committed, and commit here, you must read the curator, has been added to this particular reconstruction of the history by a person who is a curator, and this curator is the Taunus curation team. They did it in 2019. Okay? So I know who added this. And then you see this software here, there are two versions. What happens if you click on one of the version? You can actually check the changes in the software between version 1 and version 2 of this legacy software. You can see this software as if it had been developed using modern technology, using the forges. You see the difference in the way this works here compared to just dumping the content of a CD-ROM on a GitHub repository. Now we are taking advantage of all the nice features of modern version control system to keep separately the history of the curation and the history rebuilt, reconstructed of the original source code with all the annotation that we actually want. So if you want to sum up what happens here, what actually the software heritage acquisition process does is to leverage modern software development technologies, I mean, version control systems, forges, etc., to make a clear separation between the work done by the author on one side, the original author that can be in the 1960s or 70s or 80s or 90s, and the curator that is doing the work today. And then you keep, because you have this version control system, traceability of all the steps of the process. You know who did what modification to the metadata, for example, this on the curator branch, or you know the history of the different version of the original software. So you can actually rebuild the history of the evolution of software completely. Then once this is done, you archive it in software heritage, and when it is archived in software heritage, the interface of software heritage is designed in such a way to clearly show the difference between the author of a software and the committer or curator that had the software at a particular moment in time, which you don't see so easily on GitHub, right? Otherwise, the software is designed to show the two things differently. And the other interesting thing of software, since we actually keep a snapshot of all the version control system at all different times, we can see that if you did the curation yesterday, you save it in software, then later on, you decide there were some big mistake on the system, you want to do it again, you know, restart from scratch, and you archive it again. In software edge, we have the old rebuilt history and the new rebuilt history. So in some sense, you have a history of histories coming on through the software edge archive that allows you to trace all the different steps in this curation process. So putting all this together, what we get at the end is the ability to have an iterative process that actually supports the different things that actually happen in real life. Okay? In real life, you never have, as we have seen in the example by Rombake, all the material all of a sudden available. You do starting the curation, then you finish. No, during real life, sometimes somebody pops up and tells you, do you want a copy of this extra version you didn't have? Of course, you say yes, you want to add it to the original history, but you had version 1, then version 2, then version 5. You didn't have 3 and 4. What you do? Somebody gives you 3, but you rebuild the process and you create another synthetic history that is now more up to date. Okay, this is fully supported by this process. Of course, there is no free lunch. This process is complex. It supposes that you know how to use a modern version control system. It supposes that you actually are able to take the time to produce properly curated metadata. It supposes many, many different things. And of course, we provided this document and also an evolving guide, but it is not something you can do just in the afternoon by saying, hey, I have a piece of software, let me do it. You need some technical education, training, support, etc. It is more difficult because you get more out of the process than just dumping stuff in some place here or the other. So this was my, I'm fully precise in the time of 15 minutes. So this is a moment to stop. And I wanted just to give you a little bit of a motivation. So why we, the software engineers, got involved in this? Because since we are building these archives, all these history, system, version control system, etc., we had the view of where were the limitation of the poor man approach to software preservation using forges. And we wanted to help by providing a better process. Now we cannot do everything else. Now we need to have people actually studying, adopting, using the process, and actually helping, making more clear, having tutorials, etc. I think this is the right moment to give the floor to some of the people who actually made this possible.